Okay, students, today we are going to discuss about the respiratory system, the exchange and transport of gases in the body. I am Vivek Goyal, working as an associate professor at Government National College, Sirsa. So, for respiration to take place, we need a respiratory unit which act as an interface for the outside air which passes inside the blood. So, respiratory unit in our body is composed of a respiratory bronchiole, alveolar ducts, atria, and the alveoli. So, we have the lungs, which are composed of numerous alveolar sacs, and each duct has a mucous lining having several mucous glands. The alveolar ducts, the alveolar sacs, and the space between the alveolar sacs known as the atrium, and a network of capillaries. The network of capillaries is so intense that it is known as the capillary bed. And there are about 300 million alveoli with average diameter of approximately zero point 0.2 millimeter. So the respiratory membrane is about 70 square meter in normal adult human male. The alveolar walls are extremely thin. They have to be thin so that the air can diffuse through the wall. And network of interconnecting capillaries exist between the alveoli. So exchange of gases during respiration generally takes place through a simple diffusion. As we know, diffusion is the movement of particles, the gas molecules, or anything from higher concentration to lower concentration. So gases are exchanged via simple diffusion between alveoli and the pulmonary blood. Pulmonary blood here means the blood which is coming from the heart into the lungs. So the diffusion of gases inside our lungs depend upon several factors. One of them is the partial pressure. Partial pressure is the pressure exerted by individual gas in a mixture of gases. So, for example, suppose we have a container full of oxygen and we have a container which is full of nitrogen. The pressure of oxygen inside this container is say 159 mm of Hg, and the pressure of nitrogen is say 593 mm of Hg. If we mix the two gases together, because the molecules are very much away from each other, so we can mix the two gases in the same container, and now the pressure exerted by two gases is equal to sum of pressure of individual gases. So it is 159 plus 593 is 752 millimeter of Hg. Now in this mixture where the total pressure is 752 mm of Hg, 159 mm of Hg is because of oxygen, and the remaining 593 is because of nitrogen. So this is the partial pressure of oxygen, which is written as PO2, and this is the partial pressure of nitrogen in the mixture of gases. So during diffusion, the gases always travel from higher partial pressure towards the lower partial pressure. Another thing on which the diffusion of gases depend is the cross-section area of the fluid. Fluid here is the interstitial fluid or the mucus through which the gases are diffusing. So when the air come into the alveoli, it encounters the mucus layer on the alveoli, then the layer of alveoli, then we have interstitial fluids, then we have the wall of the artery, and then the blood. And the air passes through all these membranes, including the interstitial fluids and the mucus. So the cross-sectional area of the fluid through which the gas is passing affects the diffusion. More the cross-sectional area, more will be the diffusion. Distance through which the gas must diffuse should also be considered, as more the distance, less will be the diffusion. Molecular weight of the gas. More is the molecular weight, less is the diffusion. Solubility of gas in the fluid. More the solubility of gas in the fluids, more will be the diffusion. And the temperature of the fluid. Higher the temperature, more will be the diffusion. Now, for different gases which must pass through the alveoli into the blood, temperature remains the same. So, it can be neglected, it remains the same. Solubility of gas differs and the molecular weight of the gas differs. These two are the properties of gases. Cross-sectional area and the distance, these are the property of our organ. These are the property of gases. So diffusion is proportional to the partial pressure, the cross-sectional area, the solubility divided by the distance and the under root of a molecular weight, where P is the partial pressure, A is the cross-sectional area, S is the solubility, D is the distance, and Mw is the molecular weight. So diffusion is inversely proportional to the distance and the under root of molecular weight, and is directly proportional to the difference in partial pressure, the cross-sectional area, and the solubility. Here, solubility divided by under root of molecular weight is known as the diffusion coefficient of the gas. Comparing the different partial pressure of the gases at different locations, we have nitrogen, oxygen, and carbon dioxide, which are the main gases in the environment. So, whereas the nitrogen exerts 597 mm of Hg out of the total 760 millimeter of Hg in the atmosphere, oxygen exerts 159 millimeter, and the carbon dioxide has a contribution of 0.3 mm of Hg. In the alveolar air, or the air which is present inside the alveoli of the lungs, nitrogen share is 569 mm, oxygen is 104, and carbon dioxide is 40. And in the venous blood, it is 573, 40 oxygen, and carbon dioxide is 46. So the venous blood is the blood coming to the alveoli, which is devoid of oxygen and is full of carbon dioxide. And in the arterial blood, the oxygen is exerts a 95 mm of pressure, whereas CO2 has a contribution of 40 mm. There are two factors which determine the partial pressure of oxygen and partial pressure of carbon dioxide in the alveoli. These are rate of alveolar ventilation, that's how fast we are breathing, and rate of transfer of oxygen and carbon dioxide through the respiratory membrane, and how fast the gases are being transported or transferred along the respiratory membrane. There are numerous factors that affect the rate of diffusion. We have considered two factors, rate of alveolar ventilation and rate of diffusion. The rate of diffusion depends upon the thickness of the membrane, surface area of the membrane, diffusion coefficient, which is solubility divided by the molecular weight of the gas, and the partial pressure difference, as we have discussed earlier. So more the thickness, less will be the diffusion. More the surface area, more is the diffusion. More is the diffusion coefficient, more is the diffusion, and partial pressure, the more is the difference between the partial pressure, more will be the diffusion from higher partial pressure towards the lower partial pressure. Next is a transport of gases or the transport of oxygen and the carbon dioxide. Once oxygen has diffused from alveoli into the pulmonary blood, from alveoli into the pulmonary blood, which is draining the lungs, it is transported to the tissue either via hemoglobin or dissolved in the plasma. So either the oxygen will be picked by the hemoglobin or it got dissolved itself in the plasma for transport. Hemoglobin is a wonderful molecule which helps blood to transport 30 to 100 times as much oxygen as compared to dissolved oxygen in the water or the plasma of the blood. Similarly, carbon dioxide, which is produced in the tissue, enters the tissue capillaries and is transported back to the lungs. CO2 also combines with chemical substances in the blood that increase its transport 15 to 20 fold. Now, starting with the oxygen transport, let us first consider different partial pressures of oxygen at different locations. Say in the alveoli, partial pressure of oxygen in alveoli is 104 millimeter of Hg. The partial pressure of oxygen in the venous blood is 40 millimeter of Hg. So suppose this is the alveoli. Suppose these are the different alveoli and the air comes from outside. Here the partial pressure of oxygen is 104. Now blood is draining from near the alveoli and the partial pressure is 40 mm of Hg before it reaches the alveoli. After reaching, the oxygen diffuses into the blood and the partial pressure becomes 95. And when it reaches the tissue, suppose these are the tissue cells, and the blood reaches the tissue has the partial pressure of oxygen approximately 23 millimeter of Hg. So when the blood passes from here, the oxygen diffuses from higher 95 partial pressure towards the lower 23 partial pressure. So these are some of the figures. We must remember that the partial pressure of oxygen in the lungs, in the alveoli is 104, in the blood which is coming to the lungs is 40, which is going away from the lungs after absorbing the the oxygen is 95, and in the tissues it is 23. It is the partial pressure of oxygen in the interstitial fluids. Earlier we have discussed that diffusion, which is the transfer of oxygen from outside to the inside. Now the oxygen is inside the blood and we have to transport the oxygen from lungs to the concerned organ. So oxygen is transported in two forms. One as combined with the hemoglobin to form the oxyhemoglobin, and it accounts for approximately 97% transport. And secondly, as solution in plasma, which accounts for approximately 3%. The oxygen molecules combines loosely and irreversibly with heme portion of the hemoglobin. A hemoglobin molecule is made up of four different heme chains, and when partial pressure of oxygen is high, as in pulmonary capillaries, oxygen binds with the hemoglobin. Now the pulmonary capillaries are capillaries which are receiving blood from the lungs. They have high partial pressure of approximately 95 millimeter of Hg. In this case, the oxygen binds with hemoglobin. But when partial pressure of oxygen is low, as in case of tissue capillaries where the partial pressure is 23 mm of Hg, oxygen is released from the hemoglobin. So under high partial pressure, oxygen tends to join with the hemoglobin, and, and under low partial pressure, hemoglobin releases the oxygen. So hemoglobin molecule, as I said, is a wonderful molecule having four heme chains that bind together to form one hemoglobin molecule. And each heme chain can join with one oxygen molecule. So in all, it can join with up to four oxygen molecules. Now, as we know that a single hemoglobin molecule can combine with up to four oxygen molecules, let us try to calculate the amount of oxygen hemoglobin can carry. The blood of a normal person contains approximately 15 grams of hemoglobin in each 100 ml of blood. This is the common range, say 12 to 15 grams of Hb per 100 ml of blood. Now, each molecule of hemoglobin can bind with approximately 1.34 milliliter of oxygen. So let us do some calculations. A single gram of hemoglobin, 1 gram of hemoglobin can combine with 1.34 ml of oxygen. So 15 gram of hemoglobin can combine with 15 into 1.34, which comes out to be approximately 20 milliliter of oxygen. So on an average, 100 ml of blood carries a 20 ml of oxygen. So if you have low Hb count, if we have a Hb count of say 10, so the calculations here will change from 20 to 13 ml of oxygen, and that is the reason of the fatigue because of low hemoglobin in our blood. And amount of oxygen released, this is the amount of oxygen being carried by the hemoglobin. Now, what about the amount of oxygen released? The total quantity of oxygen bound with hemoglobin is about 19.4. It is somewhat less than the ideal 20 ml situation. It is 19.4 ml per 100 ml of blood, and it is 97% saturated. On passing through the tissue, when it passes through the tissue or the tissue capillaries, the oxygen in the blood reduces to 14.4 ml per 100 ml of the blood. So it is 75% saturated. So even after passing through the tissue, it is 75% saturated, and only 5 ml per 100 ml of oxygen is transported from lungs to the tissue. So it is not that 20 ml which was carried by the hemoglobin is all transported to the tissue. Only the 5 ml of oxygen per 100 ml of blood is transported to tissue. So lesser hemoglobin means still lesser, less than 5 ml of the oxygen that is being transported to the tissue. You can easily understand this through a oxygen dissociation curve. Now, oxygen dissociation curve represent on one axis the partial pressure of oxygen. So partial pressure of oxygen is increasing from 0 to 140 here, 20, 30, 40. This is the partial pressure of oxygen, and we know that it is approximately 104 in the alveoli. And here the hemoglobin saturation. So it is 10% saturated, 20% saturated, 40% saturated, 80% saturated, and approximately 97% saturated at 104 partial pressure. So this curve demonstrates a progressive increase in percentage of hemoglobin bound with oxygen as partial pressure of oxygen increases, which is called percent saturation of hemoglobin. So because the blood leaving the lungs and entering the arteries usually has a partial pressure of 95. So if we see that at at 95 millimeter of Hg, blood is a 97% saturated. It is 97% saturated. Okay, see 97%. Conversely, in normal venous blood, which is returning from the peripheral tissue, the partial pressure of oxygen is 40, and here the blood is approximately 75% saturated. Now, the oxygen dissociation curve has a certain significance. Like if we see that during the partial pressure of if the partial pressure of oxygen falls to 20, if the partial pressure of oxygen falls to 20, say during the strenuous exercise, the saturation decreases to 30. It means it can release more oxygen. So all the oxygen which is carried by the hemoglobin, is not released during the normal metabolism, but it is the blood remains 75% saturated even after going to the peripheral tissues, which are not very much metabolically active. But if we need more oxygen, say during strenuous exercise, the partial pressure of oxygen decreases below the 40 millimeter of Hg, and it the saturation also decreases and it can release more oxygen. So this is the 40 millimeter of Hg is a normal venous blood. 40 millimeter of Hg is the pressure which exists in normal venous blood, and 20 or less than 20 is the venous blood during exercise. Next is the Bohr effect. Bohr effect states that certain factors shift the oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve towards the left or right. Now, as the blood passes through the tissue, CO2 diffuses from the tissue into the blood. The increased level of partial pressure of carbon dioxide raises the carbonic acid. As the carbon dioxide combines with water to form the bicarbonate ions, it increases the acidity. This shifts the oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve towards the right. See, this is the shifting of the curve towards right, and this is a shifting of curve towards left. So increase acidity, or the increase in concentration of carbon dioxide, or increase in temperature. So if the hydrogen ion increases, or the temperature increases, or concentration of carbon dioxide increases, the whole of the curve shifts towards right, and this is known as the Bohr's effect. This happens because as the curve shifts towards right, it can release more oxygen at the same partial pressure. Say, for example, we can see that at approximately 40 millimeter of Hg, the blood is 75%. The hemoglobin is 75% saturated. Okay, 75%. But if the curve shifts towards the right, the blood is here 70% saturated. So at the same PO2 of 40, the blood can release more oxygen as required because of high CO2 concentration. टिश्यूज़ में जहाँ पे CO2 ज़्यादा बन रही है वहाँ पर ऑक्सीजन ज़्यादा रिलीज़ करेगा ब्लड, जब और ये कब होगा जब ये डिसोसिएशन कर्व राइट को शिफ्ट कर जाएगी। Exactly opposite effect occurs in the lungs, where CO2 diffuses from blood into the alveoli. This reduces the carbon dioxide concentration, decreases the hydrogen ion concentration, shifting the oxygen dissociation curve towards the left and upward. So here there is a less CO2 as happens in the lungs, because as the blood goes into the lungs, all the CO2 present in the blood goes out or diffuses out into the alveoli. So pure CO2 concentration decreases, hydrogen ion concentration decreases, pH increases, and the oxygen dissociation curve shifts towards the right. So at the same 40 millimeter of Hg, the blood is more saturated with the oxygen. So as we have discussed, low pH, increase in carbon dioxide concentration, increase in blood temperature, and another molecule 2,3-bisphosphoglycerate. 2,3-bisphosphoglycerate or BPG in the blood keeps the oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve shifted slightly towards the right all the time. During hypoxic condition that lasts longer than few hours, the quantity of BPG in the blood increases considerably. अगर ऑक्सीजन की डेफिशिएंसी है कई घंटों तक, so BPG level will increase considerably and shifting the oxygen hemoglobin curve even farther from to the right. This causes oxygen to be released to the tissue at as much as 10 millimeter of Hg. So ऐसा कब होगा जब हमारे पास ऑक्सीजन काफ़ी टाइम तक कई घंटों तक उसकी कमी है। Another kind of transport in case of oxygen is the transport in the dissolved state. So at normal arterial pressure of oxygen of 95 millimeter of Hg, about 0.29 milliliter of oxygen is dissolved in every 100 ml of blood, whereas in case of hemoglobin it is approximately 20 milliliter per 100 ml of the blood. And when PO2 of the blood falls to the normal 40 in capillaries, only 0.12 milliliter of oxygen remain dissolved. So in other words, only 0.17 milliliter of oxygen is transported in the dissolved state to the tissue by each 100 ml of the blood. This is in comparison to the 5 ml of oxygen being transported through Hb per 100 ml of the blood. So it constitutes only about 3% of the total as compared to the 97% transported by hemoglobin. So out of the total, say 100% oxygen which is being transported, only 3% is transported in the dissolved state and a remaining 97% is transported as attached to the hemoglobin molecule. Next is the transport of carbon dioxide. It is also either in the dissolved state in the plasma or as the bicarbonate ions. Under normal resting conditions, an average of 4 milliliter of CO2 is transported from the tissue to the lungs in each 100 ml of the blood. So it is 4 ml per 100 ml of blood. The transport of CO2 in the dissolved state. So only a small portion of CO2 is transported in the dissolved state to the lungs. Partial pressure of carbon dioxide of venous blood is 46 millimeter of Hg and that of arterial blood is 40 millimeter of Hg. This is a very slight difference between the two. The amount of CO2 dissolved in the fluid of the blood at 46 millimeter of Hg is approximately 2.7 milliliter per deciliter, and amount dissolved at 40 millimeter of Hg is about 2.4 milliliter. So there is only a difference of 0.3 milliliter between the arterial and the venous blood. Therefore, only 0.3 milliliter of carbon dioxide is transported in the dissolved form by each 100 ml of the blood. And this constitutes to about 7% of the carbon dioxide normally transported. So, very less amount of carbon dioxide is transported in the dissolved state as in the case of oxygen. Now, the main part of the carbon dioxide is transported as bicarbonate ions. Carbon dioxide reacts with water in the plasma to form carbonic acid. So, carbon dioxide reacts with water to form the carbonic acid, which dissociates into hydrogen ions and the bicarbonate ions. Same reaction happens in the RBC, but at higher rate due to the enzyme carbonic anhydrase. So, same reaction is happening in the plasma as well as in the RBC, but the reaction happening in plasma is very slow because of the absence of any enzyme, and at the same time the reaction which is happening in the RBC is very fast because of enzyme known as the carbonic anhydrase. The carbonates so formed in the RBC diffuses out in the plasma. So all the carbonates ion, bicarbonate ion, which are being formed in the RBC diffuses out into the plasma. Now, as the ions, negative ions passes out of the RBC, to compensate this, chloride ion passes back into the RBC. So suppose this is the RBC and bicarbonate ions are passing out of the RBC. To compensate this, chloride ion enters into the RBC. This is known as the chloride shift, and this is happening at the tissue level. So most of the hydrogen ions combines with hemoglobin because hemoglobin is a very good buffer. In turn, many of the bicarbonate ion diffuses from RBC into the plasma. So the hydrogen ion combines with Hb, the bicarbonate ion diffuses out into the plasma, while chloride ion diffuses into the RBC to take their place, the bicarbonate ions. This is known as the chloride shift. Now, this is made possible by the presence of special bicarbonate chloride carrier proteins, which is present in the cell membrane of the RBC, that shuttles the two ions in opposite direction. The bicarbonate ions, which were shuttled out of the RBC by the bicarbonate chloride carrier protein, they move back into the RBC when blood reaches the lungs. All the bicarbonate ions which are in the plasma moves back into the RBC, and chloride ions move back to the plasma. The bicarbonate ion here in the RBC break down to the CO2 and H2O, and CO2 is by obviously the carbonic anhydrase, and CO2 is released or diffused into the alveoli. Another important thing is the formation of carb aminohemoglobin. The carbon dioxide also reacts directly with the amine radicals of the hemoglobin to form the carb aminohemoglobin. This combination of CO2 and hemoglobin is a reversible reaction that occurs with loose bonds, so that CO2 is easily released in the alveoli, where carbon dioxide concentration is lower than in pulmonary capillaries. This accounts to approximately 20% of transport. This is how the carbon dioxide is transported back to the lungs. So we have discussed the transport of oxygen, which either dissolves itself into the plasma or it combines with the hemoglobin molecule and then is transported to the tissue. In case of carbon dioxide, the carbon dioxide either dissolves itself into the plasma or it it joins with the water to form the bicarbonate ions, which dissociates into hydrogen and the carbonate ions. And with the help of chlorine, the carbon dioxide is transported back to the lungs. Now let me tell you one more thing, the Haldane effect. Haldane effect tells that the binding of oxygen with hemoglobin displaces the carbon dioxide from the blood. This is say partial pressure of carbon dioxide which is increasing, and this is the carbon dioxide in the blood. Now at partial pressure of 100 millimeter of Hg oxygen, the PCO2, the partial pressure of oxygen is. One more important thing I would like to share with you is that with an increase in carbon dioxide in the blood causes oxygen to displace from the hemoglobin. Another important thing I would like to discuss is according to Bohr effect. Another important thing I would like to discuss is that as we know that according to Bohr effect, which we have discussed earlier, increase in CO2 concentration causes oxygen to displace from the hemoglobin. So as the carbon dioxide concentration increases, hemoglobin releases the oxygen. The reverse of this is also true. That is, the binding of oxygen to the hemoglobin displaces the carbon dioxide from the blood. According to Bohr effect, increase in CO2 will release O2, and according to Haldane effect, binding of oxygen with hemoglobin displaces the CO2. The diagram here shows a portion of carbon dioxide dissociation curve. This is the carbon dioxide dissociation curve when PO2 is 100 millimeter or PO2 is 40 millimeter, and the arrow indicates the Haldane effect on transport of CO2. So hemoglobin is the saturation of hemoglobin when oxygen concentration is less, is represented by this dotted line. It is more, say at any concentration, say at 40, it is approximately 50% saturated. But when the concentration of oxygen increases, it is only say 30 to 35% saturated. It shows the effect of higher partial pressure of oxygen on carbon dioxide transport. So according to Haldane effect, the combination of oxygen with hemoglobin in the lung causes the hemoglobin to become a stronger acid. This displaces carbon dioxide from blood into the alveoli. Because more acidic hemoglobin has a less tendency to combine with CO2 to form the carb aminohemoglobin, thus displacing much of the CO2 that is present in the carb amino form from the blood. The increased acidity in the hemoglobin also causes it to release an excess of hydrogen ion, and this binds with the bicarbonate ion to form the carbonic acid. This then dissociates into water and CO2, and CO2 is released from blood into the alveoli and finally to the air. So this is approximately reverse of the Bohr's effect.